roster projection 1.0. We're going to take our first crack at the opening day roster, all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, January 26th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, hope everyone's having a fantastic week so far. Happy Friday. This sweatshirt, the collar on this, it's been on a hanger a little too long. I think it's pretty safe to say. We are going to take our first stab at the opening day roster. And this is always super fun to do. And like one of everybody's favorite activities and conversations to have. It always gets a lot of momentum and always has a really, really fun conversation that's kind of brought along with it because there are so many different opinions and varying opinions out there. I think the Tigers are in an interesting spot currently where the core is pretty self-explanatory, but there is a solid 2 to 5 even kind of fringe roster spots that could go a lot of different directions. And we're going to start those conversations today. The reason why we're doing it today and we didn't do it earlier is to make sure that we were really done with moves. I think it's pretty safe to say, not guaranteed, but I think it's relatively safe to say this is going to be pretty darn close to what the 40-man roster looks like throughout spring training and then on opening day, obviously. I also think that doing it now instead of waiting until spring is important because we want to be able to have a starting point before we get into spring training and we start playing games and see these dudes live. We want to know who has to climb, who has room to fall, who doesn't have room to fall, etc. We want a control group, if you will, for all of my STEM people out there, right? Which I absolutely was not. But I think that that's an important thing to start. It's just a control. This was 1.0. Everything after this is going to be a variation of our first kind of crack at it. And that's what today's episode is all about. We are going to, again, discuss the entire roster, try to fill out all 26 guys that will be on the roster on opening day. Also important to note, I've been wrong about this plenty. And that is also, like last year, I think, was my biggest one in really that I can remember was the Akil Baddoo versus Kerry Carpenter back and forth. You know, it wasn't that long ago, right? Where we were going into last season and it was a big debate on who people wanted on the Major League roster on opening day, Kerry Carpenter or Akil Baddoo. And very quickly, Carpenter kind of put that conversation to rest as the season went along. So a lot of fascinating conversations stem from this. It's also important to note that this is 1.0. So this will change. This is subject to change. And if you have a different opinion that's A, beautiful. That's awesome. That's like the whole fun in all of this. But B is only time will tell which side of the aisle is right on a lot of these conversations. And there's going to be third and fourth and fifth options. It's not just a fork in the road. There's going to be a lot of forks in the road. And that's what makes this such a fun and interesting conversation. Okay. So a lot of wiggle room here. And this will change. It will. And that's why it's, I want to preface it by that. Like this absolutely 100% is going to change from now until opening day. But without further ado, let's get it started in here. Great song. So I think for starters, how I broke this down, and this is how I've done it the last 2 years as well, if you're like a super long time listener, is I break this down and I always re-explain this story and I'm not sure why. But when I was in elementary school, I want to say third or fourth grade, and we were first learning about like probabilities, right? My teacher had a giant like thermometer basically in the classroom, like a whiteboard-esque type of thing, but it was a picture of a thermometer. And at the very top, it said certain. And then as you know, very likely, more than likely, kind of likely, 50-50, and then, so forth. You get the bottom and you get to impossible. That's kind of how I break down my roster projections. We will go by position, obviously, but I categorize people into likelihood of, especially this far away from opening day. I'm going to break them down into locks, which I think are 100%, extremely likely, which are like 85 to 90%, solid chance, 75%, then real conversation, which is anywhere from 40 to 60%, right around 50-50, then unlikely, which is well under 50, and then we have not on the 40-man roster at the moment. Okay, that's how I've broken this down. So let's start with the locks because that's the quickest conversation, and I don't think there's too much wiggle room here. Offensively, at catcher, Jake Rogers, about as big of a lock as you're going to get. Spencer Torkelson, Javi Baez. I know there's a moan in the audience, a groan in the audience, if you will. A sigh, whatever you want to say. He is a lock to make this opening day roster. Mark Canha, don't think you trade for him unless you're planning on him being on the opening day roster. Kerry Carpenter, I have as a lock. Matt Vierling, I have as a lock. Riley Green, I have as a lock. That's it for the offense. And again, we have like extremely likely following up. So if you're freaking out that there's somebody you think should be on there, they'll probably be in the next wave. Starting pitching, Tarek Skubal, Kenta Maeda, Jack Flaherty, and Matt Manning. Then for bullpen, I have 5 locks. I have Jason Foley, Shelby Miller, Andrew Chafin, Tyler Holton, and Alex Lang. So there's 4 starters, 5 relievers, and 7 bats that I think are 100% locks, and those are them. Again, I don't think there's too much conversation around those guys. You're not going to sign the 1-year pitchers. You don't sign them, and especially guys like Maeda and Flaherty, you don't give 11, 12, 14 million dollars unless they're going to make the opening day roster. Okay, so they're about as big of a lock as you're going to get. Shelby Miller, similar conversation, just out of the bullpen. Andrew Chafin, similar conversation, just out of the bullpen. Holton did enough last year. I'd be shocked if he didn't make it. Foley, I think the biggest lock in the entire bullpen, to be completely honest with you. The one that I was debating putting on extremely likely and put on lock instead in this whole thing was Alex Lang, just because of the struggles he went through last year. I would be stunned if he wasn't on the opening day roster, but I almost gave it a little bit of wiggle room, but I decided that, you know what, I don't really see a scenario, even if he's got a 7 or 8 ERA in spring training. I think that they'll start the season with him on the roster. Okay, next up, we have extremely likely. These are people that I think are essentially locks, but not quite, like as close to a lock as you can get without being one, basically. I would be really shocked if they weren't on the opening day roster, but I do think there's at least a little bit of wiggle room there and a little bit of an opportunity for someone else to take it maybe. Carson Kelly, first up, the only reason for that is I don't think that his contract is very big. So I think that if they just for some reason love Dylan Dingler and don't even care about catching depth anymore and just go, you know what, forget it, we're going to call up Dingler, then maybe they wouldn't lose sleep over the loss of his 1-year contract, his option that they picked up. But again, this is like very, very slim. Like this is any reason I can find to not make it a lock type of conversation. I think Carson Kelly's absolutely going to be the backup on opening day. 18. This is number 18 so far. I had 16 people that I viewed as locks. Carson Kelly, number 17. Number 18, Casey Mize. The only conversation would be if the arm wasn't where they wanted him to be, then I think maybe there's a little bit of a conversation there, but I'm fully expecting Mize to be not only on the opening day roster, but in the opening day rotation. And then last up for the extremely likelies, we have number 19 on my 26-man roster, and that is Parker Meadows. Okay. Parker Meadows has 2 options left, and I think that there is a once in a blue moon type of opportunity that we go into spring training and Parker hits 040 and has strikes out 60% of the time in spring training. And they go, you know what? we're going to let the bat marinate a little bit. Even if he's just in there in April and then we call him up when he's a little more confident, then that can be a conversation. But I don't view Parker Meadows as a guarantee. I think of the extremely likelies, he's also the least likely of the extremely likelies, but he's still an extremely likely. This is a very lot of vocabulary being used here. I understand. I'm trying to make it as clear as possible. I'm fully expecting Parker Meadows to be the opening day center fielder. Okay, I don't want to get that misconstrued or twisted at all. I think the assumption that he's just going to hit well and it's just all going to be fine and dandy no matter what is a little bit maybe fortuitous. I think we should give him a little bit of a leash there, and that's why he finds himself an extremely likely. But again, I would be surprised on January 26th if you had come from the future and told me that Parker Meadows was not the opening day center fielder. Okay. Let's get into the real kind of meat and potatoes of this conversation, and that is everybody else. We have solid chance, which is people I'm expecting to be, but I think there's a little bit more of a conversation. And then the 60 through 40 percenters, which is everybody kind of at and around 50% with still 3 roster spots to go after that. Okay, we will get into all of that right after this. GameTime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. And that is true. I just went to the Wings game on Sunday, used GameTime as I always do. They're the definition of clutch to me because they fit my lifestyle in terms of me deciding at the last possible second that I kind of just want to go see a sporting event that day. And I love all sports. I love all Detroit sports. And sometimes I just wake up and talk to my roommate and we're just like, hey, let's go down and see the Wings play. Let's go see, the Pistons play. That conversation hasn't been too frequent this year, but and in the summer, it's going to be my go-to for the Tigers as well. They have all-in prices that show you your total up front, so you know what you're getting, and you know you're getting a great deal as well before you check out. You can buy the tickets in 2 taps, so literally just a matter of seconds. But they have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even half an hour after the event has started. It's the best place, and really, in my mind, the only place to find last-minute seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. You can download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON, all one word, capital L, capital O, for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back on Monday, hopefully talking about how the Lions continue to win. But we will continue our offseason conversation. We're only weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. It cannot get here soon enough. But I want to talk about rotation. I want to talk about lineup cards. There's a lot of conversation, just off-season stuff in general. We have PECOTA projections that'll come out, prospect rankings. A lot of conversation still to be had from now until game time. Game time. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, the first of its kind, 24/7 covering the top sports stories in the league. Locked On local experts, national experts, you name it. So go to Locked On and go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Okay, so we're talking about the roster and the roster construction for your Detroit Tigers. Next up, let's just jump right back into it. These are people I think have a solid chance. I think they're very likely to. This is around like my 75% area. I don't think they're the biggest locks if they have awful springs or if somebody else really blows it out of the water. I think that they have a chance to maybe fall off, but there's still players that I would consider it a surprise or somewhat of a shock if they weren't on the opening day roster. I have 3 people in that category. We're at 19 for those keeping track at home as it stands right now. So we're going to get up to 22 here. Number 20 on my roster, I have Andy Ibanez. Number 21, I have Zach McKinstry. And number 22, I have Will Vest. Okay, so that leaves 2 spots in the rotation left, assuming you're going to handle or you're going to carry 8 men in your bullpen. And that gives you probably just one or two players left in your, or I guess two players left for your utility role. I think when it comes to, really quickly, we'll kind of wrap up those three. Andy Ibanez still has an option left, I believe. So if they really thought that somebody else wanted to, or was making a push in spring and they wanted to send him down and still keep him on the roster, I believe they could. But that being said, Andy Ibanez he was good last year. Like there's really no way around it. I mean, the dude was solid, and with all the question marks that are kind of surrounding the team at second base, kind of, but mostly third base, I think that they want to roster Andy, and I think that Ibanez is a guy that Hinch really liked for the platoon scenarios as well. When it comes to Zach McKinstry, had the May of, Barry Bonds-esque type of May, right? Aaron Judgian month of May, and then was well below league average offensively the rest of the year. The reason why I think McKinstry still makes it is I think AJ Hinch really, really likes Zach McKinstry. I think he plays a ton of positions at a plus level, right? He plays, we talked about it a lot. At the end of the season, he was in the running for Gold Glove for utility players, and he deserved it. He's a plus defender at like 3 or 4 or 5 different positions, can play up to 6. I think that he likes that. I also think he's a lefty bat that can come off the bench. I think Hinch likes that. And something else that we'll get into and will be a much more of a conversation in our next section when we get into really the kind of the meat and potatoes here and all the 50-50 guys. Zach McKinstry has 0 options left. So if you aren't going to roster Zach McKinstry, then you would need to pass him through waivers, and I don't think the Tigers are going to risk that. Will Vest, for the last couple of spring trainings, I've gone into it like, oh, Will Vest could be, on this roster, or he could play himself off the roster if he struggles. He still has multiple options as well. So he's a guy that I think just because he has minor league options could absolutely be a guy that maybe doesn't make the roster, but I'm fully expecting him to as well. So again, still in my solid chance. So that leaves us at 22. Okay, so that leaves us with 4 spots left going into this real conversation bracket, which I think is, again, kind of the biggest conversation here. There's a large group of people that fall into this this kind of 40 to 60%, or maybe 35 to 65% range when it comes to odds of making the opening day roster. I'm just going to list off all the names, and then I'll go through and talk about who I think is going to be on the roster and which 3 names from this category I pick. Okay, we have Bo Brisky, Alex Faedo, Ryan Kreidler, Miguel Diaz, Reese Olson, Akil Baddoo, Sawyer Gibson-Long, Brendan White, Joey Wentz, and Nick Maton. Okay, now if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to share my screen here actually, so you can kind of peek at my cheat sheet that I put together. So this is what I have been using. Now, if you're not watching on YouTube, no worries at all. I'll explain what I'm looking at. So basically, I just have all the names. It's just a Word document. So I wrote down all the names, and then in parentheses next to the names, I have how many minor league options they have remaining, because that is it weighs heavy. That is way more into consideration on these decisions than a lot of people realize. If you don't have any minor league options, you have to be put on waivers, and anybody in baseball can take you. Now, if you clear, then you stay with the organization, and nobody's the wiser. But it does weigh heavily on a lot of these decisions. So I have Bo Brisky, Alex Faedo, and Ryan Kreidler being the 3 from this group that I have. I tried everything, and I genuinely mean everything in my power to get Miguel Diaz on this opening day roster. As you all know, I am a huge fan of his. I loved what I saw last year. I loved what I saw in spring training last year. I think his changeup splitter thingy is just a phenomenal pitch. I tried everything in my power to do it, especially with 0 minor league options remaining for him. But there's a lot of conversations to be had around this area. First up, Bo Brisky, a lot of options left. There's always a chance that they just start him in spring training. Alex Faedo has an option left, a guy that they absolutely could start in spring training. Ryan Kreidler, 2 options left, has had a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, a guy that they could put in the minors for sure. Reese Olson, I have starting in Toledo. I know that's blasphemy to a lot of people. My thing is, I don't think they want him in the bullpen. I think they want him to be stretched out and be ready to go as a starting pitcher. It's also important to note that injuries in this rotation will happen. We've talked about it a lot this offseason. There is nobody on this roster that is guaranteed to even go 140 innings, 150 innings, right? You're taking a lot of chances and hoping for a lot of innings from a lot of people. So I think they're going to start Olson down in Toledo. I think that he is going to have to get worked back up to that. But I think it's just as simple as the second an injury happens in the rotation, Reese Olson's the first call. Sawyer Gibson-Long, probably the second call, but has 3 options left. Really only got a month in the majors last year. Pretty easy option, I think. Start off the season in the minors. The 3 in this group with 0 options remaining are Miguel Diaz, Joey Wentz, and Nick Maton. We'll talk about those 3, and then we'll talk about the rest of the roster right after I tell you all about our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is, oh my goodness, let me get my cheat sheet off the grid here. There we go. FanDuel is the best in the business. We talk about them all this time. And the NFL regular season has wrapped up, but there's still plenty of time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150. Win or lose. The app is so easy to use. And there's so many different ways to bet as well. Live same game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet a layup. America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Said that completely backwards, but we ball. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On. Finishing up our conversation, let me get my my sheet here back on the screen. There we go. I wonder if there's can I do, nope. Okay, so let's talk. There we go. That's what I wanted the whole time. We were having a conversation about the kind of 50-50 players in the mix, and those 3, Wentz, Maton, and Diaz, will be the subject for a lot of conversation because they don't have any options left. So if you want to keep them in your organization, rather, you have to send them through waivers. Miguel Diaz, I hope he has another 0 ERA spring training and he forces his way onto the roster more than anybody. I hope that. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, at his age, I think that he's a guy that the Tigers would probably prefer to put on waivers than somebody else. Okay. Joey Wentz. This one is probably the biggest conversation in this whole thing. I know a lot of people really don't like Joey Wentz and are really upset because he struggled mightily last year. But he does. We talked about it a lot mid-season. He doesn't have bad stuff. The pitches that he has are not terrible. The fastball last year was terrible. It was horrific. And I think he was well aware of that. I think the coaching staff was well aware of that. Every analytic out there backs that up. We talked about it, again, a lot mid-season. His fastball just got absolutely destroyed all year, to put it lightly. So when talking about his place on the roster, I think there's a legitimate argument that they go, you know what, we are not ready to give up on this kid. And we know, or at least strongly believe, that if he is put on waivers, that he's going to get picked up and claimed by somebody else. So I do fully understand and can follow the logic behind the people that are like, Joey Wentz is going to make this opening day roster. I get it. I really do. My placement of Alex Faedo is more that I am a huge believer in him as a pure reliever. And I'm going to be and I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. We're going to get to opening day, and he has an option left because he was granted a fourth option because of injuries, and they're going to send him down, and he is going to be put in that starting rotation in Toledo, and I'm going to absolutely lose it. I'm so tired of this dude being told 1 second that he's a starter and the next second that he's a reliever, and he has no chance to gain his get some sea legs under him and get some ground under him at a given role. And they just keep back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it's going to drive me absolutely up a freaking wall. And I know what's going to happen. And this is my way of preventing that. So this is very much my own heavy bias into the Alex Faedo situation. I tried to put my fingerprints all over this roster even more by putting Miguel Diaz on there, like I said, but I couldn't. I couldn't justify the other three guys or him over the other three guys I put on there. Nick Maton, another guy. At the end of the day, I just don't think that given his age and given how poorly he hit last year and defended and really just struggled all around, I don't think the Tigers are going to make a priority to guarantee that he's not on the roster. I don't think that it's impossible though, and I want people to know that. I think there's a very real chance that Nick Maton hits the cover off the ball in spring training. He's been working on hitting off-speed pitches all off season. He comes in, he can hit a curveball, and they go, you know what? Boom, there you go. We don't want to lose you now in waivers and so forth. But that's one where I'm going to have to see it to believe it. And I think that that's probably a shared sentiment across a lot of people. So that's it. So I have Bo Brisky, Alex Faedo, Ryan Kreidler. Brisky, I just think impressed a lot when he came off of injury last year. That's a pretty easy one. Akil Baddoo, not on here. He has options left, and we have a lot of outfielders. So if he's not going to get traded, I think it's pretty safe to say he's going to start off the season in Toledo, barring an injury. Brennan White will be one of the first bullpen calls if a reliever gets hurt this year, but I don't think he's going to start off the season on the opening day roster. So let's go to the unlikely, the well under 50%. Eddie's Leonard, I think, is a guy to keep an eye on. He really just hit the heck out of the ball in Toledo after acquiring him from the Dodgers at the deadline last year. Could play a couple different positions. I think the organization likes him a lot, and he only has one option left, so he will get sent down. I don't expect him to make this roster, but I think there's somewhat of an outside chance. I don't think it's zero. We'll get into people I think that are zero here in a second too. Winsiel Perez, I think they like his versatility a lot. He had a really good stint in Toledo before getting hurt last year. Andre Lipsius, a couple of options left. I don't expect him to make the roster on opening day, but he got a cup of coffee and wasn't terrible, but wasn't uber fantastic either in his cup of coffee in September last year. Dingler, we already kind of talked about earlier. Don't expect him to make the roster, but is somebody that's now on the 40-man, but I fully expect him to be in Toledo. Devin Sweet, recently acquired, recently claimed. Don't expect him to be on there. Kiter Montero, they're going to ease back into everything. I love Kiter Montero. I don't think he's a 0% chance either. I think he could set the world on fire and kind of make a name for himself here too. But just with the three options left, I mean, they're not going to make it a point to make sure that he's on the roster. Englert, obviously last year, don't expect him to be on the 40-man, but has three options left. Wilmer Flores, three options left, obviously just got added to the 40-man. Just really a crash course if you're what the heck's an option. When you get put on the 40-man, you have three options, they call them, minor league options. So when you are it basically assumes that you are a major leaguer going into spring training every year. The entire 40-man roster is. And then you have to get one of those options has to be used to send you down to the minors. You get three of them in your first, professional, in your first contract after the major league team purchases your contract. So after you're put on the 40-man roster, and you can only use one a year. So if you're put, every time you go to the minors is not another option used. It's just the first one you're put down, you're starting the season in Toledo. Okay, there's your option used. But if you go back and forth all year, you're not burning an option every time you go up and down. Okay, not on the 40-man roster. There's only one person that I have making the 40-man that is not currently on the 40-man roster, and that is Colt Keith, and he will be the 26th player on the 40-man roster. For me, Justin Henry Malloy, Jackson Jobe, and Jace Young, the notable omissions here. Jace Young, I think if he sets the world on fire and is playing a good defensive third, you could see him in July or maybe post All-Star break. Jackson Jobe, I think, is another one. If he sets the world on fire in the first half, you could see him post trade deadline in the majors as well. Justin Henry Malloy is, again, along with, Joey Wentz and a few others, probably some of the toughest conversation to have. It's really difficult. It's really difficult. It's not impossible for him to make this 40-man or to make this opening day roster, rather. And they'll have no issue adding him to the 40-man. Like, my worry is not, they need to then make room for him and cut someone or DFA someone. There's still plenty of players you can do that with on this roster. For Malloy, for me, it's just fit within the roster. I don't think that there is a slam dunk fit, and he isn't out of options. They don't have to bring him up. So I have him starting off the year in Toledo, which pisses me off. It frustrates me. So if you're mad about that, I'm upset about it too. But how many outfielders do we need, dog? Like, you know what I mean? We'll get to my final depth chart here, and then we'll kind of continue this conversation. Starting pitching, my 5-man rotation: Skubal, Maeda, Manning, Mize, Flaherty. My bullpen: Foley, Chafin, Shelby Miller, Tyler Holton, Alex Lang, Vest, Faedo, and Brisky. My catchers are Rogers and Carson Kelly. First base: Spencer Torkelson and Spencer Torkelson. Second base: Colt Keith. Shortstop: Javi. Third base: Matt Beerling. Outfield: Riley Green, Parker Meadows, Mark Canha, Kerry Carpenter. Utility: Andy Ibanez, Zach McKinstry, who also can play outfield, and Ryan Kreidler. I don't think they need to walk into the season, or that they want to walk into the season necessarily, with 5 outfielders. And on top of the fact that it's 5 outfielders, if you walk in with Green, Meadows, Canha, Carpenter, and Justin Henry Malloy, like, Parker Meadows is like the only one you're really super confident in that's going to play center field all season. Obviously, Riley Green can play center field. That's not what I'm saying, but I don't think they want him to. I think they're trying to preserve the dude's health. I think the move to corner outfield is pretty much a guarantee at this point. I don't think they want him to play everyday center field for the foreseeable future, at least. You also have Matt Beerling, who can play corner outfield, and if you really need him to, center field. It's like, how many corner outfielders do you need? I think that they would prefer the Ibanez, McKinstry, Kreidler, 3 guys who can play all over the diamond. But I go back and forth on it a lot. And again, this will almost certainly change. This is very, reminding me a lot of the conversation we had last season with Kerry Carpenter and Akil Baddoo. I thought Akil Baddoo was the guy who was a slam dunk to make the roster, and that Carpenter was going to be left in the dust. And then Kerry Carpenter did what he did last year, and that obviously looks like a silly take now. And we have Baddoo starting in AAA for me for this roster right now. So we will see what happens. We will see what happens, but that's kind of where my head is at currently. Okay, thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back on Monday. All right. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. Let me know what y'all think down. Let me know, if I'm sure there's plenty of other opinions out there. Let me know who you're feeling, who you think is going to be on the roster. Again, I think there's anywhere from like 2 to 5 kind of fringe roster spots. So we'll see what happens. All right. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you on Monday, baby. Go Tigers.